it will continue grinding down until we make that correction that I do believe is going to be worse than the GFC, but we'll have to just keep watching. But the trend from this point is really going to be down over the next 18 months.
Welcome to Thoughtful Money. I'm Thoughtful Money founder and your host, Adam Taggart. We've got a special treat today. We are joined by Melody Wright, housing analyst extraordinaire. Melody, how are you?
I'm doing well. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm good, and it's good to see you again, Melody. You're one of those people that when too much time goes by since your last appearance, the emails start coming when's Melody coming back? Started getting them enforced this week because I interviewed housing analyst Ivy Zelman a few days ago, and as respected as Ivy is, I suspect that you perhaps might have a different outlook as she. And hey, that's what makes a market. So that's what makes all this interesting. And I also want to note too that we'll talk about a couple of topics today, but you are going to be providing the housing analysis for Thoughtful Money's upcoming fall online conference. And at the end of this video, I'll tell folks more about that because I'm sort of officially announcing that pretty much with this video. So, folks, if you want to sign up for that and lock in the early bird price, you can do so by going to thoughtfulmoney.com/conference. But okay, let's get to the meat of things here, Melody. So, if I remember my notes from our many conversations leading up to this one, you have been, increasingly confident, I guess I'd say, that the housing correction is on, and that 2025 will be a down year, the first down year nationally in a long time. So gravity is sort of finally starting to take hold of average prices nationally in America. Now it's still very much a tale of two markets, very bifurcated. You've got some markets that are really correcting hard. Texas, Florida at the top of the list, but you've told us the infection is creeping into places like California and a number of other states, largely driven by inventory finally coming onto these markets. Now, we still have a bunch of other states, especially in the Midwest and the Northeast, that are a different story. But net seems like this year, like I said, gravity is starting to win, and we'll start to see negative year-over-year national housing prices. So let me know if I described that correctly. And more importantly, what has your attention most right now in the housing market?
Yeah, you described it really well, Adam. And these things just take an inordinate amount of time, and I know that can be very frustrating for people. But this market, when you don't have any transactions, and again, I mean, it is truly shocking to me, and I've said it on your program so many times. I feel like people must be sick of me saying it, but these are the worst sales we've seen in 30 years. Worse than the GFC, and we've increased population by 20%. Explain that to me. So what's happening is that the only people that are really trained are really what happened in 24 and 23 and 24. I mean, this is all very there. When you look at those trend lines, very similar. What happened is only those that could afford it or were subsidized by the government to pay these higher prices were transacting, and that kept your median price up. But as you say, and you and I started talking about California very early, that I think we scooped it. I don't know if you've seen on X Twitter when I shared for July the 20 plus cities that had both year over year and month over month price declines. And why this is important is because this prices have a seasonal pattern, and it is typical that we would start to see and especially in the southern states, declines from this point forward through the end of the year until the next spring selling season. But when you look at that chart, it's California, California, California. And I think, Adam, you probably have something to say about why people may be leaving California.
I do. We'll get to that.
Yeah. But what I'm really looking at right now, honestly, are the builders, because and something I'm going to share in my next update once we have prices, we should get right now, new home prices are way below existing home price, that median. And before last year, that had only happened one other time in 2005 in June. But we've started to see this persistently. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the average between Lennar and all these other builders, which are saying they're giving, price concessions are concessions of about $45,000 on top of price reductions, which would even increase that price even more, Adam, to the tune of like $80,000 less than existing median home price, which is just bananas and cannot persist. And so last month, very interestingly, we saw new home median price come in around 400,000. We saw existing median price come in at like 435,000, et cetera. And some people are saying, oh, that's because of the square footage. They're building small. That argument, no one's ever been able to show me the math on that. And I don't think with such a large gap, historically since 2012, new home prices average $53,000 more each month than those existing homes. So I'm really watching that carefully because I think that they are signaling what is coming. The other thing is, we are Las Vegas. I just want to. They've been all over the news, but they're always a bellwether for this kind of thing. And honestly, when I was there in 2023, I can't believe it took this long for all of this inventory to start even coming to market. And I know that there's more, but you were just seeing that market get hit. And, that's a big tourist market. We know tourism is down. And so what you're really, the 85 cities that I track, people may wonder half the time, why are you tracking Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or something like that? I was tracking a lot of vacation towns because I knew that those Airbnbs would start to trigger issues as they have. And so you can kind of see this really weird thing that like, even in the Northeast, you're seeing vacation towns where those prices are coming down. And so this all takes time. And then what I'm hearing from my followers right now, and you can see it in places like Westchester County, the Northeast is starting the accumulation of inventory that's going to drive those price declines. And already I'm seeing them in some New Jersey cities, year over year and month over month. So it just takes time. And I'm trying to decide, is it going to be the Northeast or the Midwest that's going to be last? Because I think in terms of making the turn because of that accumulating supply, because typically the Midwest, because Ivy, honestly, on several her quarterly updates, I remember her talking about Ohio over and over as kind of the last place you could get really an affordable home price. And so all the investors sort of descended on the Midwest, but hearing from followers there as well, that's really starting to turn. And you're seeing that in like Cleveland home prices down year over year. So it's all beginning to happen. It just takes time. And, people and there are still markets that are just topping right now, Adam. I just wrote about Bentonville, Arkansas. It is just now seen its top. And so it has.
And that was a great report, by the way. And of course, people hold that up because, Walmart's basically subsidizing it. So it's this great protected market. Well, it's actually showing weakness now.
It absolutely is. And this is what I think a lot of people don't understand, Adam. And you and I talked about it. And so in many ways, I think it might be fun in the future to come back to these shows and how long we were talking about some of this.
Sure.
But this is motivated selling. You can see in the chart of Bentonville, their home sales, and they're going up. And some people are like, oh, the market's hot, hot, hot. It's like, no, people are trying to get out. Very similar in the commercial real estate space there's a whole block that just went up for sale. Now, they have some of the lowest vacancy that I've seen across the country. Why is this going up for sale? So there's just a lot of things underneath that that labor market that show me that there's trouble ahead. Not to mention they just overbuilt, like they've overbuilt all over the country. So that's kind of what I'm watching these resort towns really come under stress, and then it's kind of moving into the Midwest and the Northeast. And so I think very soon we're going to see year over year price declines in the Northeast. We're already seeing it. I think it was both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. I can't remember. If not year over year, they were month over month. And so, seasonally, yes, prices should start to come down, but these are outsized moves right now. And as you and I talk about, people simply cannot afford these prices. And more than that, Adam, I think sellers are just very delusional because they think they don't have to make updates to their homes and that, they're going to get demand this price. But I don't know if I shared this story with you, and I might have, but I have a family member that just went to go do a refinance, and the appraiser comes, and suddenly his home is worth 20,000 more for issues that were there when he bought it a year ago. I'm sorry, not more, 20,000
Less.
less. Yeah. Sorry about that. 20,000 less. I mean, that's massive. This was not a very expensive single family home. And so this is what's happening. And as the banks are kind of pulling back a little bit or being a little more checking the boxes, then you're going to see this over and over, which could be why we're seeing those high cancellations. So when you're asking what I'm watching, I mean, I'm always watching it all, but I'm really excited about the new home sales results this week and what that median price looks like.
Okay. All right. So a couple really important things combined up in there. One is, if I heard you right, you sort of expect this bifurcation gap in these markets to start closing.
Correct.
And even the markets that people have said, these are bulletproof markets, Northeast, Midwest. You think gravity is going to start to win there too. Okay, and then you think that the kind of upside down relationship between new homes and existing homes is really just more a window to the future of where things are going. You and I have talked about this a lot, right? Hopefully mortgage rates, come down here and whatnot. But it seems like, I think you and I have done the math many times and said, look, inevitably just price is going to have to be what breaks here, and price is going to have to come down from here. You're nodding vigorously as I'm saying this. So the new home, the home builders are just basically showing, hey, if you want to move inventory in this market, the price has to come down, whether that's an actual price reduction, whether it's mortgage buy downs, whether it's these concessions that you were talking about. So they're just showing us the future, and the rest of the market is just taking its time to catch up. Okay, more vigorous nodding on your end, which is good. You also mentioned that banks are tightening their lending standards, and you're starting to have maybe a more critical eye on the appraisers, as you just gave an example of there. So that's going to sort of have an additional cooling effect, right? Because people are not going to be able to get as much money to borrow to buy going forward. Okay, more nodding on your end here. Then the last is, you're saying that in the previously bulletproof markets, you're seeing the weakness start in the resort towns where there was lots of tourism and lots of Airbnbs, and that totally makes sense. But I get the sense you're saying that contagion is not going to stop there. It's going to go just sort of into the regular parts of those states as well. And this is where I think a lot of people, maybe you'll lose some people, where they say, well, no, Melody, we all know that there's been a chronic housing shortage, and there still is. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but you think, don't put those words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you think that is a false narrative and is increasingly proving false visibly as we see more and more inventory come on in more and more markets.
Correct. So correct. Due to two things really: demographics, because the boomers are starting to offload their second, third, fourth homes, and then ultimately it will be their primary homes, and you see that as well. But that also what's driven the housing market since 2012, when the government invited institutional investors in to start buying up these homes that were in foreclosure. And it's just really continued from there. And sort of mom and pop investors jumped on that bandwagon and really piled in during the COVID years. And as you and I have also talked about, we know that a lot of those institutionals are net sellers, especially in these places like San Antonio and Atlanta, where they have a very large presence, but also where you're seeing a ton of inventory distress and high property taxes, where the investors don't get the same considerations, like you do out in California. If it's a homestead property. So yes, this is a demographic story, and we're seeing households contract, not form, and that is a big big flashing red signal, is that for years and years and years, we were seeing that household size get smaller and smaller. And I can't remember if we talked about this, Adam. But do you happen to know off the top of your head what the average household size is right now in the US?
I don't. Average household size, I'll guess 2.3, just to throw a number out there.
Okay, you're close, 2.5.
Okay.
But the important thing is it's been just kind of getting smaller and smaller. It's now starting to go up as households consolidate because they simply cannot afford to live on their own anymore. Like I've
Wow,
talked to.
we're already seeing enough consolidation to start moving that number up. Wow,
Correct.
that surprises me that we're seeing that this soon. I thought it would always happen, but I didn't think it would be that material this early on.
It's in the data, and they just recently released, I think even 2 days ago, an updated kind of quarterly view of that. But yearly, it kind of stayed the same, and then it just recently went up. So and I think we're going to see so much more of this. Personally, I moved my mom in with me, because it just didn't make sense. The financials didn't make sense at this
Mhm.
point. So I think demographics are going to take hold here, and I just it's so interesting to me. A lot of these New Jersey, New York markets, if you go into using something like Property Radar that I've talked to you about before,
Yep.
you can actually see the stress. You can see the owner's liens. You can see the delinquent property taxes. You can see the bankruptcies. You can see the divorces. And so I think distress, as we kind of talked about, we're making that transition now from motivation to distress. And I think that there's still a lot of hopium, although, with the stock market where it is, I don't know about you, but it doesn't feel like mania. It feels like anger in some weird way. As I don't, I don't think that people are out there spending money left, right, and center because they feel confident about the stock market, I guess. And when I say, and I think that's the boomers, not everybody, not perhaps the retailers that are speculating. So I don't even think, even if the stock market continues to go up, I still think we're going to see the distress, because as we know, there's only a small percentage of people that actually own stocks, or the majority of stocks in the United States. And so I think they're looking around and going, what's happening? But they're not desperate enough yet. They're not slashing prices yet, but it's really starting, Adam. I'm seeing it all over the country.
Okay. So you and I have talked about this, and I'm sure talking about it again right now, which is um, after all the loan forbearance programs have ended, and now student loans have gone back into repayment, and that's the one that you have to pay. We're seeing strong signs of delinquencies and also eventually defaults in student loans, but we're seeing that spill over into other forms of consumer credit, credit cards, auto loans, mortgages. And I think we're still at the very early part of that wave rippling through. And that's going to have a lot of issues with people's ability to repay. You're again nodding vigorously as I'm saying this. So, love to hear any thoughts you have about that we haven't perhaps talked about in the past. If you got anything new to say, but also the FHA market. You have told us in the past about how incredibly important that has become in terms of influencing home prices and the government's role in that. I believe you are seeing a lot of signs of concern there that FHA borrowers are also like looking really weak now. Is that true?
Oh, yes. And quite honestly, they've been looking really weak since June of 2023. But what the Biden administration did to get through the election year was do an unprecedented loss mitigation workout where essentially the borrower could go back. They could not pay. And I've seen loans where they just got the loan, didn't pay for 3 months. I think there's actually scams out there, groups of people that know that you can do this, investors, didn't pay at all. They go to the servicer and say, hey, I had some issue. And they said, no problem. We're going to put it on the back of your loan in a non-interest bearing lien. And then they didn't pay for 3 more months. and they went back to the servicer, and then they didn't pay for 3 more months. And this has been happening since basically April of 2024. And, you can see work by people like John Comiskey that these borrowers who have taken this partial claim are 5 to 7 times more likely to go delinquent. And so many of them have. And so what we know happens in October is, number one, they're going to put guardrails on this program where you have to make a trial payment. This is something standard in all loss mitigation, Adam. Since the GFC, that you have to make 3 payments before you can officially get that work out. Well, they got rid of that in 2024. It's coming back. The other thing is they said no limit to how many times you could go back. The only limit was 30% of your unpaid principal balance, which, if you think about a high balance loan, that's a lot of money. And by the way, you're not going to get caught up for years and years just because of the way the amortization works on that and the interest. And so now what they're saying is you will only be able to get one every 24 months. The other thing is, and this is important, if you have delinquent student loans, you will not be eligible. And, per our HUD, we believe that's about 40%, not 40% delinquent, but 40% of FHA borrowers have student loans. And we've seen these incredible delinquency rates over 10% in student loans. And so, yes, pretty soon FHA, it's been in distress. It's just been held up by this government program. And so when that goes away, what's been building behind the dam is going to come over. And you can see it already in foreclosure starts and foreclosure sales are up year over year. And so some may think, they look at Black Knight and they're like, delinquency looks down a little bit. That's because Black Knight excludes foreclosures from their headline delinquency numbers. And so I always say, look at those. Yes, look at the delinquency number, but look at those foreclosure numbers, and they're on the rise. Adam, that's ATTOM, not you, Adam. Adam came out with a report, I think today, showing these huge increases in foreclosures. Now, from very, very low levels. I'm not saying there's a foreclosure tsunami happening right this second. I don't see that tsunami until probably, and with, barring any government intervention, till Q1 or Q2 of 2026.
Okay. But it seems like we talked earlier about, you're already seeing banks start to tighten their lending standards. My guess is, and you correct me if you think differently, is we're going to see those standards continue to tighten as these housing headwinds continue, and especially as we see more and more borrowers fall into distress, where the banks are just going to say, understandably, hey, look, we got to be a lot more careful who we lend to now.
Right. I think too, we've talked a lot about it's the non-banks that are lending and doing the majority of lending, and they have to use their liquidity facilities or borrowings to do that lending. And a lot of these are getting refied at higher rates. And so it's not making a lot of sense. So they're not actually being prudent, Adam, as much as they're constrained. And as well as the consumer is not giving them a lot of choice in terms of seeing this debt to income increase, as well as these credit score drops that have been impacted because of student loans reporting to credit again.
Okay. And so an example of one of these non-bank entities is like a Rocket Mortgage, right?
Right. Yes.
All right. And you've said in the past, quite ominously, and I just want to remind the audience here too, that your primary expertise is in the mortgage side of things. That's sort of how you enter this industry, and you still are active in it. Where, if I remember correctly, you said something like, these companies weren't really around much in 2008, and so they don't have the institutional memory of the mistakes that were made, and that they very much look like they're making a lot of the same mistakes and are going to have to reap that whirlwind at some point.
That's correct. And it's funny to me, what recently happened with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. They just took massive provision for loan loss. And that's what you do. You take that through the income statement to build your allowance for loan loss. And what they said in the news was, because of home prices decelerating, are not being as much. But what they understand is that you can paper over all of these expenses when that origination machine can just keep juicing, just going. It keeps kind of feeding money into the machine. But when that starts to slow down, then you can't paper over your losses anymore. And the reason I'm mentioning them is because my former boss is the CFO of Freddie Mac, and I know he knows. And but I don't think, if you remember what happened at Freddie Mac, they kind of wiped through the C-suite. He was one of the only ones in the C-suite left standing. And so I haven't talked to him, but it's very interesting to me that once people got out of his way, the first quarter, we got a huge provision. You also saw it in Mr. Cooper and others. They are gearing up. They understand that after October, there's not any good news on the horizon, because the other thing, Adam, is they got paid incentives. So if you did 4 of those partial claims, they got almost $8,000, which is not a lot of money. It's not like they were getting rich off of it. They were keeping the lights on. And so when that starts to go away, as well, at the same time that they have to advance out unpaid taxes and insurance, and I'm seeing advances all over my client books increase, primarily, especially one who has a huge presence in California because of those massive insurance increases after the fires. So those non-bank servicers are in for a world of hurt. And I have a theory that I believe what's recently happened with, like, I don't know if you saw this, the ban on trigger leads, which probably doesn't make any sense to anyone, but believe it or not, when your mortgage company would do a hard pull on your credit, those credit companies, agencies would sell that to other lenders who would buy those and then call you up trying to steal you. Well, out of nowhere, we get this trigger lead ban. And guess who it hurts the most? It hurts the non-banks the most, unless they do their own origination and servicing, which someone like Rocket and Mr. Cooper will have that advantage. However, it's the banks are going to do really, this is going to help them quite a bit. And my belief is they actually want to get back into mortgage lending after backing away for so many years. And I think that's why you're seeing they want that supplemental liquidity ratio, the SLR, to be lowered. That's, you remember that, talking with Basant. So I think the banks are getting ready to come in and likely snap up a lot of this and bring it back into the banks, because it's really, the non-banks don't have deposits, and it's really a very dangerous game. And why, Yellen was yelling about it for years. It's massive exposure. But anyway, that's a theory that we'll see if it plays out. But I believe that the banks will likely start to move in here.
Okay. Well, I find it really ironic, and folks, this is no joke. I'll hold my phone up here. I got this text as we were talking, and it says, "Good morning. We offer direct approvals with no credit check and funding in 24 hours. Working with us makes the process simple and hassle-free." So I don't know. This may be one of those trigger leads. I mean, it's just
It's crazy.
total
Yeah.
spam from out of the blue. I have no clue who this number is, but yeah.
Yes.
So somebody sold my info somewhere in the way
Yes.
you're describing. Okay, so let me ask you this then. So, like I said, hopefully mortgage rates come down. I mean, obviously the entire real estate complex is hoping for that. But let's say the Fed does start cutting here, right? As it is still expected to do. These increasing headwinds, these need for banks to increase their loss their loss allocations, provisions, and as these companies start tightening their lending standards, do you expect mortgage rates to move very much, or will one kind of be offsetting the other, right? The Fed's trying to get the short rates down using the short end, but the banks or non-banks are starting to tighten their lending standards, and so basically the mortgage rate kind of would presumably go nowhere. But I mean, it could maybe go up if they tighten faster than the Fed cuts.
Yeah. I mean, watching the 10-year this year has just been fascinating. Really, I mean, it's always fascinating, but the last, I'd say, 6 months have just been wild. So to me, it's even more than that. It's that I don't think we're seeing foreign buyers kind of step back. I think, and I haven't validated this information, but I saw a tweet that Chase had the largest increase in treasuries on its balance sheet. And I have a feeling what's happening is that the primary dealers are having to step in and kind of take the place of foreign holders and or foreign buyers. And so honestly, Adam, I'm more concerned. The Fed, it doesn't matter. Last year they cut in September, mortgage rates took off because that they're determined by the
Right.
bond market. And the appetite for mortgage-backed securities, as you rightly discussed, which are going to start to carry a higher risk premium because of these losses. But for me, looking at mortgage rates, my biggest concern is just kind of this stepping back by international buyers in the bond market. So.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I don't know where mortgages are going to go. I have been talking to more people, I think, who are getting more confident that bond yields will come down. And I realize not everybody thinks that way. So there's probably a bunch of viewers who don't share that opinion. But I think if rates start going down because of a safety trade,
Right.
yeah, that might end up getting us lower bond yields and lower mortgages, but it may not be for a very good reason,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. One, I don't, I'm not trying to pit you versus Ivy. I'm just trying to note that you guys have what I perceive to be, different outlooks. Ivy basically said she thinks more or less like the worst is in for the housing market. She said we're going to be kind of grinding along the bottom here for a while. And yes, she expects prices to be down nationally in 2025, but she does expect things to be healing and really things to get better as 2026 goes along. I get the sense from you that you feel like, no, we are still in the early stage of a multi-year housing correction. And looking at least through the end of 2026, you just think it's just basically going to get worse, correct?
Absolutely. And and I kind of find it confusing that take. But because back in 23, Ivy was talking a lot about demographics. And so that's to me why I think she and I differ so much. I feel like she kind of lands in the camp of what I would call the inflationistas that just think that prices are going to go up, and it just keep going up. But I think that supply and demand is going to take hold take the reins here. And so our demographics, as I've talked about on your show many times, and someone inevitably says, don't talk like that, Melody. But unfortunately, 15.6 million boomers will be leaving us between 2025 and 2035. And they own the majority of housing. And so I guess I don't understand. We've got 500,000 new homes in progress right now for sale. We're not selling them. We're seeing very low sales for new homes. I'm not sure how, and we've still got plenty in progress, as well as Adam, I know for a fact we don't have all of those permits. Like that people can build in unincorporated areas, and I've seen it all over the country, and they don't need a permit. So I believe that actually that inventory is probably 25% bigger than what we see in official numbers right now. So we're not going to be able to get through that inventory when you've got 15,000 mini hotel owners in San Diego, for instance, that are going to need to offload those single family rentals because tourism is down and it no longer cash flows. It doesn't pencil because of insurance and property taxes, and you can't borrow cheaply anymore. It just takes time for all these, especially in the what's called the non-qualified mortgage market. That's where you're seeing a lot of the ARMs or adjustable rate mortgages and things
Mhm.
like that.
Talk,
Those are
talk
all,
about not learning the lessons of 2008. Yeah.
it's so frustrating, Adam, but we didn't. And in fact, the banks have started to go all in. We're in the last part where they're getting everybody in they possibly can before they know it's going to fall apart. And I think everybody knows that you have to do some of this risky lending, but because of all of that investment, because of all those long-term rentals that the boomers owned, we are going to see continual increases in inventory. And I found it very interesting, Adam, to see some of the folks that called the crash last time. And it's not just Ivy, it's other folks out there, but there seems to be some kind of blindness that I don't really understand. But also I think what I see them all missing is the mortgage market and not understanding exactly how the government has come in here and held up prices. But it can't last forever because these FHA borrowers are just collapsing.
Right.
So
Well, it sounds like the FHA borrowers are collapsing, meaning, they weren't as creditworthy. They were given loans they shouldn't have gotten. They're now getting to the point where they can't service them. But at the same time, that government distortion is getting diminished, right? The new administration is coming in and saying, hey, you know what? This was too generous. We're going to start restricting. So it's kind of coming from both ends, correct?
that's right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I just saw something
Um,
recently that, FHA just came out and said the other thing is all of that American Rescue Act money that went out to the states and cities that went into down payment assistance programs. And FHA just announced that they're upping the credit score of people who are receiving down payment assistance because of they're seeing such crushing delinquency. So again, it honestly, because the government back so much of our mortgage market, it's more important what they do versus what like the non-banks do, for
Sure.
instance.
It's
Yeah.
just like we see in education and any other
Right.
system where the government comes in and becomes the primary lender, right? Where they just distort prices far beyond what the true price discovery would have them be. And, that's great if you're a beneficiary of that right up until it doesn't work anymore. And then
That's
it
exactly right.
hurts all of us. Okay. So a couple other things I want to bang through here. One, so it's interesting. I've talked about with Ivy over the years. I've talked about it with you over the years and a few others. Um, it's been a real sort of pet interest of mine, which is, what does happen to real estate when the boomer generation starts aging out? And by aging out, I mean either, having to give up their homes because they are moving into assisted living or a nursing home or they're dying, right? And as you said, we're going to have 10,000 a day basically for the next 20 or 20 years or so, more or less, age out per day, right? And the question I've been asking over the years is, okay, so I can clearly see this coming in the horizon, but when does it matter, right?
Mm.
And it's funny because it kind of feels like, I've heard, oh, it's not for a while, not for a while, not for a while, but now I'm beginning to hear like, no, it's now here. So you're basically, I'm kind of getting from you that like, hey, we've had the first pitch, like we're in the first inning now with this thing, correct?
Absolutely. And I know this not only from just looking at the data, but helping people myself who are inheriting properties right now from their boomer parents. And it's all kinds of a mess, Adam. Actually, they can't afford it or somebody's taking leverage against it and they got to
Right.
get out. And
Or,
so, yeah,
or
go
there's just
ahead.
multiple kids, right?
It's just multiple
So
kids.
who gets the
Right.
house? Well, we don't
Exactly.
know. So let's just sell it and split the proceeds, right? So I'm just curious,
Exactly.
like what's your gut percentage of a house that gets passed down by a boomer parent to their children, whether it's one child or 10 children? What's the percentage that it actually just gets liquidated?
I think it's a lot more than we think. I mean, spitballing, I would say at least like 65%.
Okay. So yeah, so that right there, that's a lot of homes coming on the
No,
market, every day for the
right.
next 20 years, right?
That's right. That's right. And we can look at Japan. I mean, if we have questions, we can look at Japan and their aging demographics. They've got 11 million vacant homes right now that U.S. citizens are going over to buy for pennies because they're vacant. No one's and Adam, quite frankly, this is what's so kind of upsetting about this inventory shortage narrative is I have driven all over this country and I can tell you there are vacant homes everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's already happened. It's just that our data is so lagged and so out of date. We really don't have a true picture. And this is why I just say drive around, folks. Just look and drive around at night. You'll see how much vacancy. And here in Johnson City, which is a tiny little town, you see a ton of vacants that were in the middle of a fix and flip and they had to abandon it because they could not afford it anymore. I mean, it's kind of crazy. In this small town, you're seeing half built construction homes getting abandoned and getting listed.
And you're not in like a hot flipper investor market, right? Yeah.
We have one big event. It's the International Storytelling event. My sister used to Airbnb this farmhouse that I live in now. but basically like she was booked plenty in like 21, 22, 23. It was just like, and that's the way it was. But everybody bought here too, because it was listed as a number 4 place to move, I think in 2023 or 2024. Again, it's all this narrative, that has been driving a lot of the speculation. Everybody was like, oh, that's going to be a number 4 spot to move. Let me go buy a house there. I mean, that is literally what was happening.
So it's really interesting because, I mean, you and I have said for a long time as we've, worked to debunk the housing shortage narrative is we haven't had a shortage of units. What we have had is an imbalance of ownership, right? So you've had a lot of homes that are owned as second, third homes, or owned by an investor, or in the process of being a fix and flip, or someone's buying to rent it as a short-term rental or whatnot, right? So you've had a smaller number of people who've owned a lot of these homes, right? So, if they were just magically put on the market, we'd have plenty of homes for people, right? And that's the danger here, right? Is as collectively those people who own the homes start having lots of reasons to put those homes on the market, inventory can grow much faster than most people realize. And I think we're starting to feel validated on our warnings around that. And what's kind of interesting is, you know, it can be in these, hot tourist markets. It can be, where there's a lot of vacant homes. It can be in fix and flip markets, whatever. But also like I was just listening to somebody from Palo Alto, literally just 2 days ago, complain about had lived in Palo Alto for decades and decades, and were sharing how frustrated people that are there about the decline in community because so many rich Chinese basically have bought homes there mostly as a way just to get capital out of China.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so there are a lot of these, big mansions pretty much that nobody lives in. And, the community that once was in the neighborhood is gone because you just literally have less people living in the neighborhood now, right? So it's happening kind of all over the spectrum, which I find really interesting. It's not just one weak part of the economy or society. It's kind of, for all these different reasons in all these different places. Um, let me ask you on this. So I have railed in the past about how high investor purchases of single family homes got this time in the housing market cycle, right? And I railed about it for two reasons. One, because as you said earlier, I felt like it put the market at greater risk when a downturn came, that if you had, an institution that owns thousands of homes, especially in maybe the same metro like Atlanta, you gave an example, for them, the decision to sell is just an Excel decision. It's not a roof over their head. It's just, you know what, these aren't penciling out the way that we thought, dump them,
Right.
right? And you could dump a ton of inventory in a market in a short period of time and really pull that market down. We're seeing that in a number of areas now. But I think even more than that, what bothered me was just, look, when you have a housing affordability issue where your younger generations just can't afford to form families because they can't buy homes and whatnot. And I'm sure you've seen that chart. I put it up recently that's been all over the internet of 30-year-olds who were both married and homeowners. It was like 50 something percent in 1950 and it's 13% now, right? To me, that's just toxic to your society, right? And so the question I've had is like, why don't we have some guardrails in there that say, hey, at least when markets cross some sort of unaffordability threshold, we start limiting investors that can buy in. And I would say first and foremost, you start with foreign investors, right? Like, why are we letting foreigners who don't even live here buy up our single family housing stock, right? To me, that's like a no-brainer. And we're all of a sudden starting to hear that with things like farmland and things like that. We've finally woken up and said, you know what, we probably shouldn't be selling this stuff off, right? And I've
Right.
heard some rumblings about foreigners. I haven't yet heard it about just investors. And
Mhm.
I would probably limit large institutions from buying first, but there would be times, and probably even now, where I would place limits even on the mom and pop landlord to say, hey, you know what? Like, until the median 30-year-old can afford the median house at the median job, like, we should have some limits on that until things are better in balance. I know there are people, I've made this argument before, who don't like it. They think it's, from a libertarian standpoint or whatnot, it gets in the way of free markets. But I think sometimes you do need guardrails in there, especially for major society priorities like letting your young families form. I'm just curious, A, do you have an opinion on this? And B, do you think we will see limits at some point in the story given affordability levels, or not going to matter because natural market forces are starting to actually prevail and things are just going to get a lot more affordable because prices are going to, go down dramatically?
Yeah, so definitely have some thoughts on it. And, I think what I would ask is I would start with the foreign buyers too, Adam. I mean, when I was down in Miami, I lived there for a couple of months in the summer of 23. I lived in a ghost condo and I was surrounded by ghost condos. And, some people think they're used for money laundering. You interviewed me in that ghost condo. And so it's just vacancy everywhere. And these are foreign buyers that are parking their money one way or the other. So I do believe in limiting that. I think, though, we're at a point where it's not going to matter much anymore. Market forces are taking over. But at a minimum, our government should not be subsidizing this. And this is what's happening in the FHA program is people are committing what's called occupancy fraud by saying that they're going to occupy that home as a primary residence, but they don't. And nobody enforces that or checks it. If we
Right.
did,
Meaning you're getting an FHA loan to make a housing investment and be a landlord?
and a VA loan, yes. I've met several veterans that use the VA program for this in Hawaii, which you and I've talked about because I'm
Mhm.
showing you how that is just a dumpster fire right now. And so yeah, we have the rules that could help with. I mean, FHA is supposed to promote first-time home buyers. The fact that we had the lowest first-time home buyers on record last year since they started tracking in the 80s tells you that that program isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing anymore. And so, yes, get the government out of housing. I probably am more on the libertarian slant where it's like, I would like for the free markets to work, but they're not free markets right now. The government is driving this market. And
Mm.
so to me, get them out or limit their role and make them enforce, the guardrails that are there, then we'd be way better off. But this housing market has not been about shelter for a very long time. And I recently did a piece, you may have read it, Adam, where I showed that even our own government doesn't see housing as shelter; they
Mhm.
see it as investment. And so, I think on our last show we talked about this housing market could correct all the way, meaning that it comes way down because there is going to be so much of it out there. This would take decades, but I don't know. We could really correct all the way to where this is based on whether people can truly afford it, which is going to be very different.
Which, I mean, as painful as that would be, that's what you call a free market. And,
That's right.
I'd love for it to get to that stage. Um, I do worry, and I won't spin off on this, folks, I promise, but like this K-shaped economy that we're now increasingly in, the danger of moving to a lowercase I-shaped economy, which I talk
Right.
a lot about. I
Yeah.
do worry that as wealth continues to concentrate, the people where that wealth concentrates, they've got to invest it. And okay, housing is a good, asset to have in my diversified portfolio. And, you just get more and more kind of aristocratic landlords out there. And I don't know, that's one of the worries I have, which is why I kind of feel like some guardrails, I think will probably be needed at some point. But
Yes.
anyways, people can debate that in the comments if they want. So uh, as you mentioned earlier, you alluded to earlier, yes, I have left California for Nevada. And you know, um, it was something that I've been thinking about for a long time, but it was interesting, like many major decisions in my life. Um, just events just kind of forced me to make it. It was something I was sort of spinning on for years, but the reality was is the tax bill came this year, and I signed the check and wrote it, and then I asked my wife to sit down next to me and said, look, there's a whole bunch of reasons that we choose to live in California, even though it's really expensive and da 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 da, da, right? And I said, okay, let's think about all the reasons why we want to stay here and pay the California premium. And then I showed her the number on the check and I said, is it worth this much? And she just looked at me and said,
Wow.
no, it's not,
Wow.
right? And so it just made the decision easy. And of course, once we made the decision, the attractions of moving that seemed like impediments before, all of a sudden, it was like, wow, there's actually even more reasons to leave than we initially thought, right? So my
Mhm.
point is, or my question for you is, um, in many ways, the system kind of loses with me making this decision. Now, Nevada will benefit, but it's a 0% income tax state, so it's not going to benefit the way that California benefits from my
Right.
income here. Now, it's obviously a net loss for California, and not like, Adam Taggart leaving the state is going to do much to the state of California. But there are a lot of people like me who've already
Mhm.
made this choice, and I think I'm probably still at least in the middle, if not still a little closer to the front of the vanguard. If
Right.
these trends consider, there's just going to be a lot more mobile
Right.
professionals who leave as well.
Right.
Um, what are your thoughts on this dynamic of just, I mean, part of it is, hey, it's the free market, it's capital going where it's better treated. But I do feel like kind of net net, there's going to be a lot of pain felt by the states that are, really losing out from this migration.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see it. I would agree with you that I think you're still early. I mean, but what, it's so funny when I went out to Los Angeles. I mean, I just kind of, you hear the sound from the crowd that's like LA prices will never go down. Well, they are now,
Mhm.
but it's like they've lost 150,000 households. Of course they're, like there's enough inventory and things are going to start to change over. And that's been going on, but I think it's going to accelerate even more. I mean, Adam, these people that got their home insurance bills that increase 40% and have no fire risk. And this
Right.
is just because the way you just had to spread the love around in California, similar to how in Boston right now, because the city is suffering from lower income from commercial real estate property taxes, that they're putting that bill out to the consumer. So absolutely. I mean, I think Tennessee is going to be a destination for a very long time, but it's going to be slow because it's only going to be those that can really afford it. Unfortunately, a lot of people are trapped in their geographic locations. But yes, I think this outward flow is going to happen, until those policies change.
Okay. Um, Well, it's going to be really interesting. And folks, I'm happy to share any thoughts from the front lines about my own personal experience. Um, all right. Well, look, I got to start wrapping it up here. And again, Melody, I'm very excited for the update you're going to give at the Fall Online Conference for a whole bunch of reasons. But most importantly, I do get a sense talking to you here that the pace is picking up here now of the rate of change in the housing market.
Mhm.
Um, and so in the middle of October, I think we're going to have a lot more visibility into what 2026 is going to be like, but also I think a lot more visibility on just some of the trends that we're talking about here right now. Let me end by kind of asking your thoughts on this topic. I was interviewed the other day, and look, I'm not an economic expert. I just talk to a lot of them. And so people like to pick my brain to say, hey, Adam, what's your synthesis of all this? And I try to keep it simple so the average person can follow along. And basically, I said, I am concerned in the short term, like the next year or so. I think the economy is slowing and likely to continue to slow. I think there are, cracks in the job market that are concerning. Obviously, these housing trends are very concerning. And so I'm sort of bearish in the short term. I said I'm becoming more bullish in the midterm, and it's a little squishy, but say the next 12 to 18 months to 36 months. And the reason for that is whether you agree with them or not, the policies that the new administration is implementing, um, tax relief, uh, striking hopefully better trade deals, driving, reshoring American jobs here, securing presumably if reports are to believed, trillions of new investment in the country that would otherwise wouldn't have come in, deregulating, working through whatever means they can to bring down borrowing costs. All of those things stimulate the economy. And to just dismiss them because you don't like the administration and say those aren't going to make a difference, I think is just reckless. I think just being pragmatic, you have to say if they end up doing those things, or at least to some material degree, the economy is likely to grow faster than it otherwise would, right?
Right.
Um, and then I say, look, in the long term, I'm still just as concerned as I've always been, ever been about the debt and the deficits and the purchasing power of our money and all that stuff. So it's kind of like bearish, bullish, bearish, right?
Right.
But one of the things that makes me sort of that challenges the midterm bullishness would be if in 2 years, like we're just in the raging depths of this housing, crash that
Right.
could potentially happen. And I don't use the word crash lightly, but I do think one of the last times we talked, you did say you think this correction in housing is going to be worse than the 2008 one. And if it is, yeah, then I could see that offsetting a lot of the potential benefits of those policies that I mentioned. So I'm just curious, do you have any reaction or thoughts around that?
Yeah, I thought the show you did with Darius and Luke was really excellent. And, I as well have to think about that. And, but it's going to be a matter of timing. And after I listened to that show, actually, I was thinking a lot about how we could potentially see some pretty violent corrections here and then have a kind of pause and small appreciation, maybe kind of like what you saw at the end of the 90s, early 2000s before it went crazy. But
Mhm.
then the demographic cycle is going to take hold
Really kicks in. Yeah.
and really kicks in. But this is if the data we have is accurate, Adam, and my eyes are not. And what I've seen is not true, which is all of this already existing vacancy out there. And so this is where, I think we have to be just paying attention, constantly watching the signs because anything could happen. If, for instance, Trump loses here about the tariffs, that could be pretty gnarly. If we had to pay that money back or whatever. So who knows what's going to happen, but the underlying fundamentals are and by the way, that BBB is it's going to be good for asset owners and things like that, but not good for that very low end of the KRI, if you want to call it that. But here's the thing, Walmart, almost 4% of its, of what it gets in is from SNAP shoppers. And so cutting SNAP means hurt to private profit. And so these things all have consequences, less jobs and things like that, as well as I think that we're starting to see the AI narrative unravel. I don't know about you. It's just like, this is how these things happen, gradually, then suddenly, but it's like suddenly everyone has, an article out there about how we're in an AI bubble where there's been
Well,
many
sorry
of
to
us
interrupt, but
that
I just posted on X Twitter yesterday, Sam Altman saying that,
exactly. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Sam Altman, right? You got to think, why this, why now? But I mean, there have been those of us that have been arguing this is a bubble. I mean, I personally worked with large language models. I have that experience. But it's suddenly everybody's talking about it. And so we could really see, even though I'm a huge fan of Darius's, really some short term, really painful corrections in certain stocks that could
Right.
have
And just to be
massive
clear,
impact.
this is
Yeah.
why I'm bearish in the near term, right? I mean,
Right.
this is a
Yeah.
component of why, yeah.
Right. So we shall see, right? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, but I'm sticking to the fundamentals that ultimately we might get a pause in this because of all of those stimulus, but it will continue grinding down until we make that correction that I do believe is going to be worse than the GFC. But we'll have to just keep watching. But the trend from this point is really going to be down over the next 18 months.
Okay. And let me just ask you this. I'm asking you to guess here. And again, you're going to be on this channel repeatedly next time at the conference. So you can always give us an audible update. But when does your gut tell you This isn't going to be a debate anymore. You're not going to be having to convince people. It's just going to be absolutely clear that we are in a housing correction that very few people are going to get out of alive.
You know, the industry is holding on for dear life, although you hear, news articles now about price corrections, but typically they all sound like Ivy. Yeah, there's some short-term pain, but it's all going to be fine in the end. I think, even though that foreclosure not ever really a big part of my thesis, I think that as those continue to grow because of our recent memory, the boomers' recent memory, right, of what happened, I think that's when you're going to get large scale acceptance. And so I think that, by June of 2026, you will see um, massive increases in those foreclosures. And, we've already seen a lot of increase in delinquency right now. And so this June, this is very seasonal, but through the back half of the year, Adam, this in mortgage delinquency only grows from here because people have run out of their tax refunds or bonus payments, and they have to spend for school. I mean, retail or spending is up. Well, yeah, I didn't have a choice about a lot of things I had to just purchase for the
Right.
first day of school. And
Right.
so
And the increases
uh,
are mostly due to increase in prices. People aren't necessarily buying more things. Yeah.
no, I paid like $20 for a 12 pack of colored pens. Like what? I mean, there's some of these items where you're just like, this is insanity. I think Walmart increased, they did a survey of 50 items. They increased prices on 51% of them. This is really going to start crushing, I mean, an already crushed bottom of the K, but it's just moving up. And then you're seeing something on the bottom of the K, which kind of goes back to your aristocracy theory, which I share those concerns too, and I'm constantly watching them. But us little folk, we go and buy items from those asset holders or things like that. And when we can't do that anymore, you are going to have folks that on the super prime that come under stress, as well as we haven't even started to see the real losses from commercial real estate. And we know there are a lot of
Mm.
rich limited partners out there that are about to get really, really hurt.
Right. Unless they're able to dump all their crappy private equity and private credit holdings onto the retail investor with, this new trend to try to let them
That's
do that.
right.
But that's a rant for a different day.
Yeah.
All right. Melody, it is just always such a true joy to talk with you. So, quick reminder for folks, you'll see Melody next on this program at the Thoughtful Money Fall Conference, which is Saturday, October 18th. We'll do a deep dive interview with Melody on this all things housing then, but she'll also come on. She's very kind in doing this for about a half hour of just live Q&A. So not only will you hear her update, but you'll be able to ask her whatever questions you want. And again, if you want to lock in the early bird price for that conference, just go to thoughtfulmoney.com/conference and sign up for it now. If you are a premium subscriber to our Substack, make sure you look for the discount code that I've sent you by this point via email, and you'll use that to get $50 off of that early bird price. All right, Melody. So for folks that would like to follow you in your work, your excellent work at your Substack as well, where should they go?
M3 Melody Substack. And then you can find me on X Twitter at M3_Melody or on YouTube at M3 Melody.
Right. Melody, can't thank you enough. Thanks so much for coming on. Really look forward to seeing you next at the conference.
Thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait. Thanks, Adam.